Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff After Hours, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, Bill Cannon, on this snowy, ridiculous February night. I actually have a 90-foot driveway, and I couldn't get my car out because the snow was like piled a foot and a half high. And I went out there with my old creaky bones with a shovel, and I was able at least to get it the hell out. And then I called my landscaper with a plow, and he came to the rescue. But I've been stuck in the house all day, which I don't mind in this type of weather. Nancy, how are you doing?
I'm good. My street is pretty good on Canal Street in Manhattan, but I did hear a lot of cars today trying to
The worst is digging your car out in Manhattan. The worst, right?
video this one guy in his truck just going back and forth and back and forth. But it's like it's gonna happen. There's only so many snowplows in New York City, So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Here we are, two New Yorkers. Of course, we're here talking amongst ourselves, and I don't even introduce the guest to you.
ah
This is this show is usually about real crime stories, and actually part of it will be. But Nancy Rommelmann is a novelist. She's an unbelievable writer, and she's quite eclectic. In fact, she's very opinionated also, and she has a lot of things to say about the state of journalism and about the state of writing today. And I think it's a fresh face because not all journalists these days are writing from the heart. They're writing almost from a script. So we're going to cover a lot of things. And I told her this is not going to be a Q&A. We're just going to have a conversation. And Nancy, one of the first things I wanted to talk to you about, Nancy,
yeah,
was in 1994,
yeah.
you visited John Wayne Gacy, who was then on death row. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. And it's really funny, but you and I know this name so well. And occasionally now when I tell people, that I met him on death row, they're like, who? I was like, oh, okay. He's passed in the serial killer canon. Well, John Wayne Gacy was accused of and eventually executed for killing at least 33 young men and boys and burying them in the crawl space of his home in Illinois and also a little bit close to the home. I wound up on that story because I was living in LA at the time and I knew a guy who he was kind of an artist. He was in a band and he'd become pen pals with Gacy. Gacy, as some people might know, was actually quite an interesting painter. Like, sort of like, you see, I'm not comparing their personalities, but if you see former President George Bush's paintings, like he's actually quite a good painter. Gacy was also an interesting painter. And this guy, Rick, that I'm talking about, he had a few of his paintings.
His name was Rick Gayes. Is that how you pronounce it?
Gayes, yeah.
Gayes, okay, Gayes.
We had mutual friends. He was like kind of a young rocker guy in LA. I think he was 25 at the time. And he wanted to go visit Gacy and had gotten information to visit Gacy before he died on death row. And he thought it would make a good story. And I thought it would make a good story too. Of course, I had never written a feature article before. I was like a very, very green journalist. But I wound up selling the story to a magazine at the time called Details, made the cross-country road trip.
You were going from California to Chicago?
Right, to Illinois, to Menard, Illinois, where the state penitentiary was and where the death row was. And, it's interesting. I kind of didn't know what I was doing, but I kind of did it right. We kind of took the emotional temperature of people crossing the country, like, what did the college kids that we stayed with think?
Something, I loved that fact about your story almost more than you meeting him.
Right, because
talking to people how they felt about a serial killer.
Right, because we are the people that create the serial killer's image, right? We pay attention to it. Obviously, there are nicer things to pay attention to in this world.
Absolutely.
But it turned out to be interesting that we did see him on death row, and he was executed shortly thereafter. And the story was my first feature. I'm happy with the way it turned out. People can, it was actually printed before there was an internet. So a couple of years ago, Outfit came along and asked if they could reprint it so people can get it on Amazon now for like on their Kindle. So yeah, he was actually the first person where I understood what that sort of, I would call it almost like a charming sociopathy or psychopathology is. Very charming, very chatty, very interested in us. Yeah, kids, let's get you kids a sandwich. Very, very. and indefatigable.
But that's all part of the manipulation of someone who's a killer, you know.
Absolutely, but I didn't know that. I was young. It was my first story. I had not, you the first time you ran into people like this, you didn't know about it either. And then all of a sudden you realize as you do more, investigatory work or more reporting, oh, this is a type. There's a scale, and Gacy was just, the zenith of it.
You
But
know,
I,
I'm sorry, Nancy. I just want to say when I started out like in the detective bureau and I started interviewing people, and I used to watch the detectives that had the greatest skills of interviewing people. And at first I would go into the room believing the guy, and then I would see how people lied and how you could tell they lied by through their body language and through things that they would say. And I was a student of watching these great detectives just dissect someone's story, and you as a journalist, you're doing a lot of the same things.
well, yeah, you just have to listen to them and let them keep talking. It was interesting because it's not that I ever, believed John Wayne Gacy. We knew he was guilty. I mean, here was someone that could literally say to your face, I don't know why the cops say I killed him. A lot of people had keys to my house. My housekeeper had keys to my house. Like some small old woman is going to kill 33 men and boys and bury their bodies. But whatever. But we were there for so long, and I've said before, we'd still be sitting there with him if it were up to him. He never stopped talking, and by the end of it, you really could see the patois, and how he worked his game. And it was an interesting piece to write. I'm glad I got to do it. I don't really know that there were any other journalists that got that kind
And
of
just so some of the people listening know that I'm not familiar with John Wayne Gacy, he
Sure.
buried 27 of these young men and boys in his house, in his
Yeah.
crawl space of his
Yeah.
house.
Yes.
So
And
he was quite a sick dude,
yeah, and his wife was like, "What is that smell that's coming?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know. I think we got rats down there. I'll take care of it."
Oh God.
No,
Did he put lime on the bodies to kill the smell?
probably I don't remember. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, come on, 27 bodies in the basement.
Yeah.
But there were some, yeah, down there, and there may be more. There
He
may be
was
more.
like the precursor to Jeffrey Dahmer because he was also a homosexual, right?
Well,
I mean, he was
he
married though, right?
he was married, and he would lure these young men in. He did like contracting work and some construction, and he'd lure them in, and he'd say, "Hey, let's hang in my basement. We'll go. We'll have some beers. We'll maybe look at some stack films. Oh my God, I got this thing I want to show you. Look at this thing. It's this cool thing. It's these handcuffs, and you put them on, and then take care. You try it."
Nancy, you just used the word from the way blast from the past, stag films. No one knows
Wow.
what it's like, when I was teaching college one time, I used the word dungarees and the
Oh,
kids looked at me
dungarees.
like, what are dungarees?
My mother calls them dungarees. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So,
I dated myself, blue
um,
jeans. We said
me too. Me
dungarees,
too.
right?
It's all good.
That's all
Um,
right.
anyway, yeah, that's it's a story that I stand by. When it got picked up by that little publisher, I went in and just wrote a new little intro and cleaned up like one or two words, but it stands. I think it's the piece I want to write.
I love the part where Gacy wanted to know a little bit too much about your sex life.
Well, yeah, he's like, "Come on, Nancy, you can tell me. Have you ever been with this
Yeah.
girl?" I'm like, "What?" Like, what? I mean, but this guy had 2 weeks to live, right? And
Oh, he wanted to live life to the fullest in those last 2 weeks, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think he always did. I think he was voracious for, it's interesting. I've learned this since, and I know we're going to talk about our book and a lot of other people that I've interviewed that really are sociopaths. One thing that they do is first of all, they get you to believe that they really understand you and you really understand them like other people don't. I mean, one
Right.
thing about Ricky Galles, he really believed that Gacy cared about him. And I was like, did you ever consider, Rick, that you're exactly the profile of the people that he murdered?
Right. He
And
probably would have killed him if he would have
yeah,
come to his
that's
house,
right, because I trust you. So it's like they make you give them, and in ways that you don't understand at first, like secrets about yourself. Like maybe you admit, like one time you robbed someone's house, or you did drugs or whatever it was. Well, they're storing up that information so they can use it against you later. I absolutely promise you that. Oh, Did we lose something?
No, no, I'm trying to put a picture of the
Oh,
book
there
on
you
the
are.
screen. Can you
Yeah,
see
yeah,
it? Can you
yeah.
see it now?
I can. Destination
There it is,
Gacy.
Destination Gacy.
Yeah.
He was not a handsome fella.
No, he was pretty portly,
Yeah.
and kind of small. I mean, short. Um, but yeah, so I think that's Gacy asking me something like, tell me about your weird sex life, or have you ever been with a girl, was something that he thought, maybe I can store this up and use it against her later. Well, there was no later for him, but he couldn't stop, doing what he did.
If he was so short and portly, how did he overpower the people that he
Well,
killed?
like I said, it was the handcuff trick. Was a lot of the ones he'd say, "Look at these handcuffs. Look." He'd put them on himself, and he'd show them the release button. But
Uh-huh.
then they'd put them on. He said, "Here, try them." They put them on, and they were handcuffed. Like they couldn't get out.
The
And
old handcuff trick. No, I don't fall for that one.
yeah, no, I'm not with in someone's basement with some guy I don't know. Yeah, let me
Yeah,
try
yeah,
some
let me
handcuffs.
try those on.
And he was really. I'm not gonna go into it here, readers. Obviously, if they're interested, but he was terrible. I mean, he tortured people, and he was a terrible, terrible human who, for his own sicknesses, did these things.
And one of the things he said too, he said, ask anything you want. I'm not ashamed of anything I've done.
Well, here's the thing about Gacy, which is something that I think is across the board with sociopaths. They understand right from wrong.
Yes.
They know it, but we're all too stupid to understand that those rules don't apply to them. They apply to us, the stupid people, and
Yes.
he can catch us up in these things. But him, no, 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 no. We just don't understand. Those rules don't apply to him.
So psychopaths and politicians are very closely
Yeah.
related.
Are we going to talk about Cuomo?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
we're
get
gonna
to
get
we'll get to everything. We'll be here for hours.
hours. We're still going to be here next year. Yeah.
You're warm, right? Actually, I have wine outside, but I don't like to drink during the show, so I'm just drinking
Me
water.
neither. Me
But
neither.
I'll drink later. I'll save it
Okay.
later on. But one of the things also is that there is such a huge fascination with serial killers. I mean, if you go on YouTube, everyone seems to have a show about serial killers. The Long Island one, the Gilgo Beach thing. Oh my
Oh,
God. There's books, there's shows, there's YouTubes, and amateurs are putting these YouTube shows and they think well, some of them have thousands and thousands of followers. And I'm like, why would anyone listen to them?
can
You
I
know?
can I give one really incredible? I think the best book about that is
Sure.
Lost Girls. Lost Girls by Robert Kolker, Bob Kolker, who I actually know, who's great, who blurbed my book,
Right.
who's a lovely guy, and his book is really, there's true crime that it's like, like,
Yeah.
and then there's
That's good sound effects you
right?
did. You must have been
And
practicing
then
that.
there's the stories that are really looking for, they're really looking for something else, which is what I hope I did with my book. And Lost Girls came out before I finished my book, and it was so heartening to me. And I thought, if I can write my book with, the sort of efficacy and humanity that Bob Kolker brought to his book, Lost Girls, about the Gilgo Beach murders, then I will have done my job. And
I've
it's really
watched, I'm sorry,
wild.
I've watched some of the documentaries on that. And I think one of the themes is that the police and the detectives didn't work as hard as they would have because these were sex workers.
But isn't that right? Isn't
I
that
don't
right?
know.
I mean,
I can't say 100%. Look, I've worked on cases with prostitutes and we work just as hard.
well, I mean, you would think, because these are human beings, and especially
Right.
they're like vulnerable human beings, right? If anything, you should want to make sure that people who, in my view, it should be legal, and let's get rid of some of the crime that, that
Right.
that these girls, but people, yeah, I mean, and hopefully that's changing, as the decades go by. They're not considered so, smutty or bad or anything like that. But yeah, I think that that's true. I think that it was like, well, it's another dead prostitute. Well, oh well. Well,
Right.
it wasn't just, wasn't it? I mean, there
But
was a
it's on its face, though. It's also a very, very difficult case because the bodies weren't found till a year after they were actually killed, or at least a year. Some of them even longer.
some longer.
And the girl that was Shannon Gilbert
Hmm.
was running out of one of the apartments there. That was actually on a job. They didn't find her till after they found the initial 4 or 5 bodies.
And I mean, she actually, I think, had gotten a call through to the police. Am I getting that?
Yes, yeah, no, you're correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they couldn't, and had run to a neighbor's. I mean, it's just a mess. just such a sad, 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 sad story.
Nancy, could I just take a second to shout out to, there's a lot of people, there's 46 people on live chat right now. I just want to shout
Yay.
out to some of them. Heartbeats, hello. Rachella Pranzo, happy birthday. I won't call out your age, but she's one of our biggest fans. Bill Ryan, Ryan Investigation, Mandy Hall, Sammy C, Joey from Brooklyn. What up, Joey?
Joey.
Sammy C, B Higgs, Rachella Pranzo again. MJ, hi everyone. Duty Ron is on the air. Duty Ron, we're gonna do tomorrow night. So don't say everything tonight. You have to save some, right?
Oh, that's right.
10 o'clock.
I have a whole pile over here.
Okay. You got all kinds of different stuff. Miley May, MJ, Dookie 4000, Moonlight View, 12-Step Woman. Again, Joey from Brooklyn, Case Files Lover, and Gemmas. I can't shout out to everyone, but I'll keep you in mind the second round. So again, we're talking about serial killers, and we had just gone over. I did a show with two retired first grade detectives from the NYPD on the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, and he was probably the biggest savage I've ever been, read about or studied in my police career. Even in my live police career, I never saw someone as evil as that guy. But yet people are so enamored with him. There were women sending nude photos of themselves to this guy when he was on death row.
When I was waiting to get in to visit Gacy, we finally got into the prison, and we were waiting, and it was really one of these like old, like stone turrety prisons, like water dripping down the walls. And we're waiting in the little waiting room, and there are these two gals, and they're death row groupies, and they're in my piece. And one of them she's a big gal with a gigantic bosoms, which are like
gigantic breastises.
She's got a big rack, okay? And they're like encased in this completely see-through top. And she's like, you're gonna go see John. Get John some sweets. He likes sweets. But meanwhile, she was going to see this other guy his name might have been John too, across the way. And she's like, she's in there. And you have your viewers have to understand, you are not, okay, we were not in a room with plexiglass. We were sitting at a little tiny school table with Gacy on the other side and us on one side. He was handcuffed.
Right.
But she's in the other room, like right across the hall. And there's the guards are outside in a buzzed out area. She's in the other room, like right across, like on his lap. Like,
oh my God.
Like what? There's a lot of theories about this. It's like, they actually feel kind of safe because the guy can't really get to them. I don't know what their pathology is. I think that maybe it gives them, they feel important, and like maybe they're going to take care of this guy. I don't know.
Duty Ron, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. Alley Cat for the $5. Like it's so important to keep us eating and keep me paying the guys that are going to shovel my driveway. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. This is Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, Bill Cannon, and we have fantastic writer Nancy Rommelmann. I want to ask you, what is the derivation of your last name?
Rommelmann is so it's my dad's last name, my late father. His father was or his grandfather, or his father was German and Czech. His father's father had been German. Okay. So it's I don't really know. I didn't really know that side of the family. My grandfather died when my dad was 3. So I just don't really know that side of the family, but it's German.
Were you ever tempted to shorten the name?
No, it's kind of a cool name.
Yeah. But that's the famous Field Marshal Rommel.
That's right. Rommel. Yeah.
The tank master, right?
Hey, the Desert Fox.
Yeah, the Desert Fox. I imagine you could be the Desert Fox.
That,
would have a different meaning if you were the Desert Fox.
Yeah, my husband's last name is Johnson, and when we got married, I was like, Nancy. I was already a journalist for many years. I was like, Nancy Johnson. I don't know. I just can't do it, babe. He's just like, I don't care. So yeah, my dad's name.
Talk about some of the people that you interviewed relative to this on the way to go see John Wayne Gacy.
Sure. So we were driving cross country. The first night we stopped in Vegas. And it was when Vegas, there was still like an old Las Vegas. And we went to this really, really kind of great strip club called like the Girls of Glitter Gulch, and we're in
The
there.
Desert Fox.
Yeah, the Desert Fox, the Girls of Glitter Gulch, and it's like it's big, and we're giving them money, and there's apparently there's this Australian band. I can't do an Australian accent there. The Hoodoo Voodoos or something. We're actually wound up. They turned out to be kind of famous. I didn't know that. And just kind of talking to them about like where we were headed, and they're like fair dinkum, blah blah blah. All right, so that was our first stop. Our second stop was in New Mexico at a former boyfriend of mine. I guess he was in college. And we stayed with him and his roommates, and they got really hammered, and they were like yelling about how if they got Casey, they fuck him up and all this. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Then the third night, we stopped in Texas at a bar called the Shamrock Inn. Actually, it was like a little hotel. And we sat at the bar, and this guy next to me was just basically Gacy was on TV. You have to understand, Bill. He was being executed
in 2 weeks. Yeah, he was a big story.
All over the television.
Yeah.
And the guy sitting next to me was just sort of like a quiet Texan guy, and I can't remember exactly what he said. It's in the piece, but it was something like, he's still a human being. And I thought that was really important. And then the one that was pretty touching to me, the last place we stopped, I think before we got to Illinois, we stopped in Oklahoma, Okmulgee, Oklahoma, where my daughter's dad's relatives were full-blood Native American people, very Christian. And I got up that Sunday morning and I went to early morning services at their little tiny wooden church house, and they all prayed for me. I'm actually getting all choked up now. They prayed for me in Creek, because they're Muskogee tribe Creek, and in English, that I would be safe, and that I would be able to tell this story the way it would be told. So that's a pretty broad version of how people metabolized a serial killer. And,
but I could tell from your writing that you're anti-death penalty.
I am anti-death penalty.
And most cops, I'm not going to speak for all cops, but they're pro-death penalty because they see cops get killed. Sure. And then they see the people that killed these cops allegedly sentenced to life without parole. And then we're seeing 30, 35 years later, so recently an Anthony Bottoms killed 2 cops, got out. Cuomo paroled him. So cops are like, if he was fried 35 years ago, we wouldn't have to worry about him getting out. And they're all getting out. People that killed people don't do life in prison for the most part. Usually they average 7 to 8 years, most murderers.
I've written this, I don't remember in what piece, but I understand in the blood what it feels like to want someone to be killed for killing them, because I'm a human being like anybody else. And I understand that feeling. I understand the feeling that if someone came and killed me, that my husband would go and kill him. I understand that.
Right.
What I have a hard time doing, and I can quote the defense attorney in my book, he's a capital defense attorney, and we're going to get to the book. He said, you can't trust the state to keep the roads clear. You're going to trust them in someone's life. And that's where I start to have a problem. I've sat in on death penalty cases. They are a mess. I mean, they're really a mess in terms of, some of it is a benevolent mess, like they're trying to keep people alive, but it's a very, very messy process. And I think
something, Nancy, the very thing you cite is caused by the people that are anti-death penalty. And that's what you cite of costing $90,000 a year in California to keep someone on death row. But if liberals didn't insist the guy get 14,000 appeals, 7,
that's right,
7 last meals at, from the most fancy restaurant in California, it wouldn't cost $90K a year,
And it's like, well, we can't do this for another 10 years. I mean, I actually sat in a death penalty case in Oregon about 3 or 4 years ago, where the prisoner was saying to the judge, I want this to stop. Stop. And they can't, because it's the law. But I did say in the preface to the Gacy book, I'm like, you know what? If your heart and mind and morals don't tell you to be against the death penalty, maybe your pocketbook will, because it is definitely more expensive to sentence someone to death than it is to keep them in prison.
Right.
If you just say, you know what, life in prison, no parole, done, it's X amount.
But that's not a reality either, though.
I know. I
You
know.
know, so it's
There's no
like
true way.
politicians lie to us out of both sides of their mouth. All
I
right, death penalty. All right, life without parole. And then we got Andy in New York paroling cop killers,
it's
and and naming bridges after his family.
I'll tell you what, we'll have an encore and then we'll figure it all out for everyone, Bill. We'll just figure it out. We'll be like, no problem.
Look, I fully understand the whole problem with the death penalty, but as I said, it's caused by the very people that are anti-death penalty because they want to put gigantic hurdles in
Yeah,
front of
yeah,
putting someone to death by the state.
yeah. Well,
You're right. The state can't look. We could
yeah.
segue into
Okay.
different subjects. The state can't do shit correctly. You're
That's
right.
right. So
You know,
I can't trust them to take a person's life. I just can't. I mean, I
yeah.
can't. I
It's
can't. So
it's really sad, but
yeah,
the whole thing though with getting back to interviewing people
yeah.
that and getting their feelings on it, and then I'm sure the elites will say, oh, most people that are uneducated are for the death penalty. They do that all the time. Oh, by college degree. It's like, you know by college degree, people that have advanced degrees are against the death penalty.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
Tolstoy beat his wife.
I don't know the answer. I think there are plenty of people that have degrees that are for the death penalty. Does it? Yeah, yeah. I don't know, but I don't know the answer to any of this.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's going to be and actually, I don't think it's a question that's ever going to be. It's never going to be solved.
No,
And
it won't.
and
You're,
and do
you're right.
we, do we want it to be solved? Yes. Now we will all agree we should have a death penalty. That's a scary thing too, isn't
Yeah.
it? So
12-step woman, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. And this is Nancy Rommelmann talking about some heavy duty subjects. And, what we'll get into later on is the fact that when there's no teeth in the law, that brings anarchy. And we'll get
oh
into
yeah.
the defund the police and all that
Oh
other
yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
because it makes no sense. But yet allegedly smart people are taking the teeth out of the law. And we're not going to talk that right now. We'll get to that later on. But
Okay.
let's get to your book, and I'm going to hold up your
Sure.
book.
Oh, yay.
Can we see it? This is To the Bridge. And the amazing thing to me about this book, I got 3/4 through it. I'll admit I
Okay.
didn't finish it. I got
Okay.
3/4 through it. And you're a great writer.
Thank you.
But the amazing thing was it took you 7 years.
Well, I could do it, but get. All right. So
All right, you're going to confess to something
okay.
here?
Yes and no. So the crime happened in March 23rd, 2009, 23rd, 22nd. And then the book was published in 2018. But, I did a whole lot of reporting. I abandoned it for a while. I did some other stuff. I went back to it. And then I finally finished writing it. Then it got bought because I wrote it without a contract or an agent or anything, publisher. Then it got bought. And then it was like 2 years between it getting bought and getting published. So
Wow.
my actual time of working on it, probably 4 or 5 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, here's one of the reasons besides procrastination, and other work, because I've always just been a working journalist. It's you're asking people to talk to you about the hardest thing that's ever happened to them in their life: the murder of a child by his mother.
Well, tell the audience what
right.
the main theme of the book
Back
is.
up.
They don't know.
Okay.
And Michael Marcouli, thank you so much for that $5 super chat. I got to keep shouting out my.
Yeah, you're buying the drinks next time, Bill.
That's right. I will absolutely. I'll take you out for drinks.
I don't see any of these checks coming my way. Okay, so May 23rd, 2009, a woman named Amanda Stott Smith, 33 years old, went to a bridge in Portland, Oregon, with her 4-year-old son and her 7-year-old daughter, and dropped them over the side of the bridge. It was about a 90-foot fall, 53-degree water. The little boy died pretty much instantly. He drowned. And the little girl screamed and screamed and screamed until some Good Samaritans motored out on their boat and rescued her and also found her brother. Their mother was caught the next day, and she was, it was a capital case because it was a murder of a child, or, murder. And 9 months, 10 months later, she was sentenced to 30 years in prison before the possibility of parole. Right. I heard about this story the day after it happened, and I immediately, you can ask my husband. He sees me when these stories get a hold of me. He's like, oh, there she goes. And I had to know how this happened. And I had to know people are like, oh, because you're a mother. I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I guess, but here's the thing. People hear these stories and they say, and if your viewers are being honest, they're gonna cop to one of these two things. They either say, A, she's crazy, or B, she's evil, or some combination. And then what do? We close the door, because you know what? Mothers killing their children is a little bit of a difficult subject to unpack, right?
Yes. Mhm.
Because if we are like, oh yeah, cool, we can, talk about this, it's just like another thing. Well, then we admit that it's something that happens, and that's dangerous to us. If we want to take it all the way out, unspool the thread, it's like, oh, then we're just gonna, humankind is gonna be extinguished if we allow mothers to do this. Anyway, I was not satisfied with either of those answers. I do not believe that anything comes out of the blue, and especially a mother does not wake up in the morning and go, you know what? I don't know. I think at like 1:32 this morning, we'll bring the kids to the bridge and drop them off.
Right.
Just like I'm going to take a yoga class at 7, and then I'm going to like bring the kids to the bridge and drop them off. So I needed to know how this happened. And it turned out to be, as these things are, a complicated story, a story that people had been trying not to tell themselves for decades, meaning families that protect the bad behavior of others, protect their reputations, don't want to talk about the fact that one of the people in their family is running through hundreds of thousands of dollars, or is a drug addict, because everybody wants to look fine, everything's going to be nicey nice.
But Nancy, that's one of the things, though, you'll find out in most parents too, when one of their children are a drug addict or an alcoholic, they sometimes enable them, right? Enable them to do that. And when they go through it till it plays out, they're told by professionals, no, you have to let that person hit bottom. Stop helping him or her. Stop helping them. Let them hit bottom. That's the only time they'll start to get help and get better.
It's very hard, though, Bill. I don't know.
Yeah, no. Look.
Yeah, right.
I know a lot about the human condition, and obviously so do you. But I'm just letting our fans know, in case you don't know about the human condition.
In case you don't know, let them hit bottom. But it's also, and it's also more than that. It's like, in my case in the book, this one member of this family had a lot of money and was very, very domineering, and was very concerned with her reputation looking good, and was very concerned with making everything right, and also telling everyone what to do. So she was not going to let her son fail. In fact, she tried. This is the father of the children. She in the past had tried to let him fail, and then he just, he was a very charming sociopath. I don't want to give away too much of the book, but he was able to charm people. And the mother who did it, who of course is the guilty party, but she had help getting there. She also had a very religious family, and an extremely religious pastor who was like, go home and obey your husband. Right. Which, when you've got a husband doing the things that he was doing, was absolutely putting her in an impossible bind. Plus she had her own narcissism.
Just so you know, real crime stories, we don't expect obedient wives.
Yeah, well, she certainly wasn't that. Anyway, it was quite an odyssey. And for me, as sort of in the book is told sort of on a few tracks. You're kind of in the scene, and then you're also coming with me as I discover the story. So the story is kind of blossoming on 2 tracks at the same time. And I set out to tell the story I wanted to tell. So.
Yeah, I mean, also, as you're in a case like this, in a book like this, you're an investigative reporter, because people do not want to speak to you, and especially about this. So to get people to speak to you, you got to get documents that will back up things that you will already know. For example, well, I'm sure you got probably a lot of the documents through FOIL, right?
Well, should I admit this? I am going to admit this, but I can't exactly tell the name of the person. So there were certain, I was not able to get things through FOIA that I wanted. I tried, but I was not able to. There were certain departments that were great. The health department, the sheriff's department, they were really terrific and gave me things that I needed. Mm-hmm. Who would not give me what I needed? Who do you think, Bill? What department didn't want to give me what I wanted? Guess.
The police.
The police department. Okay. Now
they stole you forever.
They would not. They stalled me forever. ever. And I
Yep.
did so many ways. I tried so many roundabout ways. And I had basically pretty much almost finished the book. And there was someone that I had had contact with during the course of the writing of the book. And he knew me and trusted me at this point. I had definitely proven myself. And I guess he just took pity on me and he gave me the police. They're about 500 pages, and they were invaluable to me finishing the book. In fact, the whole kind of last part of the book, even though I knew a lot of it already.
But Amanda Stott Smith also, she, before this happened, she drew the attention of child welfare.
Oh yes, well, they both had, both she and her husband had
Right.
for many years, both because they had been abusive or to the children
Hmm.
and abusive to each other, physically abusive to each other. But as the years went by, um, the husband started to absent himself from the household, and she was declining into further alcoholism and unable to. Her own pathologies were making her a very bad mother,
Right.
and ultimately the worst kind of mother.
So you actually, in the book, it was interesting how you described the actual bridge
Hmm.
and how she must have had to walk up to the bridge,
Hmm.
not drive her car because it wasn't big enough to leave the car there unless she just stopped the car, threw them out the window, and got back in the car. So she must have walked them to the
Well,
bridge.
Bill, you got to get to the third part of the book.
Oh, okay. So I didn't finish that up yet.
But
I
that,
admitted to only reading
well,
three
that's all right.
quarters of
I
it.
know. Yeah,
So,
so what we do is we start the book. The book opens with the crime. You see the crime.
right.
You get what you can from what I give you, and then when we get to part three, we go back to the crime. And I this is an interesting way. It's probably kind of I don't know, traditional, but it's not that unusual way to tell the story again with what you now know. And so
Right.
you're basically seeing through new lenses and
It's
with
like,
a
it's like Pulp Fiction. Start at the
yep,
end of the movie, right?
yep, exactly.
How does
And
that so? How does that somehow work? It's crazy, right?
well, you have to spool out your information carefully.
Right.
And but it's interesting. The I guess it was hard. You write. It's sort of like they say, like childbirth. Like you do it and it's hard, but then you forget. Yeah, the book I guess was hard to write, but then you do it. So
Who gave you the most information? Was it the attorney of Amanda?
uh, there were so many people that gave me information in different ways. Amanda's attorney, in some ways, but oh, actually, I do know the answer to this. Amanda's grandmother.
She gave you
Amanda's
the most
grandmother.
information.
Amanda's grandmother. Oh my God, Jackie Drilling. I'm actually going to get all choked up here, and I'm sorry. Forgive the fire engines in the background. I live next door to the firehouse. Um, Jackie Drilling and Amanda's family, they couldn't talk about what she'd done. They just couldn't. It was too horrific. So after it happened, they dealt with the legal stuff. They closed the door, and that was it. It was never discussed again. Well, Jackie, Amanda's grandmother, who was late 70s at the time, and kind of didn't really leave the house that much, she needed to talk about it. And she got me a message. It was crazy. I met her at this boat dedication for the kids, and I had heard she wanted to speak to me, and I went up to her. I was like, "Hi, I'm Nancy Rommelmann. I hear you wanted to chat with me." And she was like, "Ugh," and I was like, "What? Okay." And
Now you
then
know what it's like to be a cop.
yeah, but then a few days later, she said to the woman who was our intermediary, she's like, "Give Nancy my information." And so she was, and also Amanda had an older son, Gavin, and his stepmother, Chelsea, was very, very helpful to me. And through her anger, obviously. I mean, there were some people that are just absolutely heartbroken and destroyed by this, and other people who are so enraged. But Bill, I didn't tell you something.
What's
I'm
that?
going to tell you now.
Okay.
This is amazing. This is amazing. Right before the book was coming out, it was about 6 weeks from publication. I was getting on a plane and I opened my phone and there was a message that I saw the subject line, email, and it said, "I need to talk to you about your upcoming book about Amanda Stott Smith." Okay, let me tell you something. This is not what the nonfiction writer wants to see 6 weeks from publication. You're
Right.
like,
Right.
"Oh my God, I got something so terribly wrong. I'm doomed." And I can't actually answer because I'm getting on a plane.
Hmm.
So I get to where I'm going and I open it up, and it is from the child that Amanda Stott Smith gave up at birth.
Wow.
He had somehow found out that she was 18, had found, oh no, 16, something, had found out my book was coming out and knew nothing about her mother, had never met her, and wanted me to fill her in about her. So I went and visited with her in Arizona and I wrote about it, and I will send you a link to the piece because this
Wow.
is truly stranger than fiction. If someone had said, oh yeah, this young woman whose mother killed and tried to kill her siblings is now reaching out to you, Nancy Rommelmann, to find out about her mother and her siblings and maybe put you in touch with them. Anyway, it's a pretty good piece.
Well, you know something, that's, I mean, when you think about a girl like that, 16 years old, never met her mother, and her mother's a murderer that killed a 4-year-old boy and tried to kill a
Mhm.
7-year-old girl. I
Her
mean,
siblings, her half
yeah,
siblings.
her sibling, how do you get over that? How, you know,
Well, again, interesting.
yeah, I'll read it. I
I
will
will. I
read
will.
it.
It's short. I published it on that website Medium. I didn't wait. I was going to publish it with a different magazine, and it didn't work out. And I just wanted to get it out into the world. And it ran. It ran 2 years ago this month. Actually, I'll send you a copy. I was very. You say you can't really remember if writing was hard. That was a hard story to write.
Yeah.
It was complicated, but
But you
anyway.
know what's amazing? It also shows the resiliency of the human spirit. Like,
Oh
she
man,
needed for some reason to find out and maybe close some kind of door she has in her brain
you're a smart
in
man.
regards to that. And she confronted it instead of letting it just eat at her forever.
You are a smart man. She needed to be seen. She
Yeah.
needed to be seen, and then once seen, she could make her decisions. It was very interesting. It was not what I expected.
You know, in the I'll reference again the that documentary, and if you haven't seen it yet, I definitely think you should see it. The Night Stalker on Netflix. It's about Richard Ramirez. But there was a 6-year-old girl that he actually kidnapped and put her in a duffel bag, brought her to his lair. I'll call it his lair. It was his home, and she described how, evil it looked, and he did all kinds of sexual things to her. And then when he was done with her, he took her out and said, "Here, I'm going to drop you off here. Call your parents, have them pick you up." And it was like, but this girl was interviewed for the show, and she's now, I would say, in her 20s. She has a family, and she was so amazing because she said, "What happened to me was horrible." She goes, "But I didn't want him to be able to define the rest of my life because of those horrible things that he did to me." And
That's
I
right.
was like, you wanted to like cry when she said that. It was
Well,
like,
we do. I think we do have choices, right? We can decide who's going to decide our lives for us. In that sense, like if someone does something really bad to you, like emotionally, or rips you off or abuses you, it's like, all right, now you've survived. How much do you want to drag that around? Hopefully you get to decide. Hopefully it didn't, you're not maimed, or even if you are,
right.
you get to decide. And she
Well,
decided.
it's almost like, when you carry a grudge.
Right.
When you carry a grudge, the other person wins because
That's
you're
right.
walking around in a state of being mad about something that, and it's going to hurt you more than it hurts that other
That's right. Put it
person.
down, leave it in the road.
Right. Let it go.
Ah,
Let it go. Right.
that's right. So
I tell you, I really admire you, the investigative work you do, to do this type of writing. And I think, all cops that have had really good police careers always think, "Oh, I want to write," because we have such great stories. But
yeah.
then when you realize you can't write in the way that you do, I mean, we could write, but you probably, to be a really good writer, you have to work very hard at it.
I write a lot. I mean, that's the
Yeah,
thing. Every writer will tell you, they'll look back at the stuff they wrote 20 or 30 years ago and they're like, oh my God, this is horrible. But you learn. It's like anything. You're a swimmer or a painter or a detective. Like you hopefully get better.
you
And
get better at it. Yeah,
I was
yeah.
working on a piece all day this morning that I still haven't finished. And it looks so bad this morning, Bill. I was like, I'm never going to be able to do this. But I'm like, yeah, you say that every time. So just keep working at it. And you learn to be clear, and if you can be clear, then, you'll get it across, and it'll hopefully, I don't know, make an impact, or people will enjoy reading it or whatever.
And you grew up on Montague Street in Brooklyn Heights in the
Well,
70s. Is
I
that
grew
correct?
I grew up near Montague Street. I grew up
You
on
know why that street rings a bell? Because it's in the song "Tangled Up in Blue" by Bob Dylan.
Oh, I have a friend of mine. So a friend of mine and I, oh, everybody watching here, it should go. I've got a new little media venture I'm starting with my buddy Matt Welch. You can go to YouTube and
Uh
find
huh.
the Paloma Media, or you can go to Twitter. It's at Paloma Media. But he's always reminding me. He's like, oh yeah, I always remember that because that song reminds me of you because of Montague Street.
That's a
Um,
great. I like the song, but he has so many damn verses. It
oh,
like
I know. You
tells a
got to wait till
whole.
the very end.
Yeah, yeah.
um,
That's right.
I,
I didn't listen to the last two verses. I'll
I
get
grew
to
up
it.
I grew up a block from Montague Street, which almost every single block in Brooklyn Heights is a block from Montague Street. I did grow up there. I wrote a little memoir. I mean, it's literally like 25 pages. That's also on Amazon, called The Queens of Montague Street, and
Uh-huh.
that got excerpted in the New York Times a bunch of years ago. And yeah, it was the mid late 70s. I was a teenager, and Brooklyn Heights was very different back then. You might remember it was, it always was sort of like a little bit hoity-toity with the
Yeah.
fantastic architecture and the promenade.
Well,
And
it was made famous for the people that are from other states and other countries that are listening. It was made famous in that movie with Cher, Moonstruck.
Oh, Moonstruck. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But this is before then. Even you had a lot of like, you had a big, you had, I don't know. I remember there were like boarding houses run by like my Puerto Rican boyfriend's grandmother, who like the guys would sit out there with their wife beaters on, and like,
Yeah.
and there were like gay bars on Montague Street, and it was kind of mixed up, like it was, and very arty. Norman Roston lived there, and Truman Capote had lived there. It was a of course I'm a kid and it's just the place where you live, but then when
Right.
you get older you realize, oh, it was kind of textured, pretty interesting, pretty
Yeah.
colorful. So people might like it. It was about me getting in a lot of trouble. So, if you like young teenage girls getting in trouble, you'll love it.
It was probably a great place to live, I would imagine.
Yeah, people can read for themselves.
Yeah, yeah. No, I lived when I first came on the police department. I lived in Greenwich Village on Barrow Street, which is
I was born and raised
yeah, a
when I was little.
Blue Mill Tavern. I
Oh
lived.
wait, okay. Oh my God, my dad worked there. He was a bartender and a waiter at the Blue Mill. I
No
learned to
kidding. I lived in
blow.
building 77 right next door.
Okay, wait a minute. This is insane. My grandmother lived at 77 Barrow Street.
No
My
way.
Anna Innocenti, she lived there till she died in 1981. And I think it was 77. That's right across the street from the Blue
No,
Mill.
no. 77 is right on the same side. It's right
Oh,
on the
okay. She
same.
lived across the street where
Yeah.
that little like gardeny area.
Yeah,
is.
yeah. I know what you're
Okay.
talking about. Yeah.
She lived there, and then we lived right next door to the Blue Mill when I was little. And my dad worked there.
Yeah. And then Chumley's is right up the street. The famous
Chumley's
Chumley's.
closed.
I know. It's crazy.
Closed.
In the history of New York City, I was a bartender at Pete's Tavern on 18th and Irving
Okay.
before I came on the police department.
Okay. First of all, my mother used to hang out when she and my dad got to work. She hung out at Pete's Tavern. Second of all, my parents courted at Chumley's.
Wow.
Wow, that's crazy. Barrow Street is that corner. I should tell, if your viewers don't know, the corner of Barrow and Commerce is the most beautiful corner.
Cherry Lane Theater.
My dad worked at Cherry Lane Theater.
Cherry Lane Theater. When I took the sergeant's test, a bunch of guys, like 4 or 5 guys, we all took beach chairs and we pulled over right on Barrow Street, and we were all sitting there just drinking our ass off because we were so happy it was over, and we all passed the test. And the cops came by and they were like, "What
are you doing?
Yeah, we're drinking. Leave us alone."
All right, I'll give you a little bit of Barrow Street lore. So my dad grew up there on Barrow, and right across the street, his mother was Italian. All the relatives lived there, and right across the street lived Marlon Brando and his roommate at the time, which was Wally Cox.
Oh, wow.
And Marlon Brando had a motorcycle. So my dad was born in 35. So this must have been about 45, 44. Marlon Brando gave them all rides on his motorcycle.
Wow.
So
Pretty
that gave
cool.
all the neighborhood kids rides on his motorcycle. So
Well, I used to go to Jimmy Day's on West
don't know
4th. And that was famous because they threw John Lennon out. He was acting like an ass, and they actually tossed his ass out of the bar. I forget who he was with. He was with some other musician, but it was another Greenwich Village
Was it a jazz club? Was Jimmy Day's a jazz club?
No, it was just a regular bar, but it was a great bar. It was one. In fact, one of the owners of Coogan's, which just closed. Dave Hunt used to 10 bar at Jimmy Day's back in the day in the 70s, you
I
know?
want the bars to open,
I
man.
know. Isn't it suck,
Oh,
all these great bars that are closing? So Nancy, we got to move towards uh
wrapping it up here.
yeah, well, no, not wrap it up, but the greatest topic I saved for last.
Oh, well, the
And
most
that's
recent one.
your 5 months going
Yeah.
undercover with Antifa in
Well,
Portland.
no, no.
Well, it was pretty much, you weren't like advertising you were Antifa.
There you go. You're selling it, Bill.
Yeah, I'm
No.
selling. I'm trying to get our fans to, realize
Okay.
who you are here.
So what they should do is they should go to reason.com, Reason Magazine. I think it's one of the best, if not the best magazine going these days. You can go online, reason.com, and type in my name, and you will find a whole bunch of writing I've done for them over the years, including 14 stories from Portland. I was sitting, I lived in Portland from 2004 to 2019.
Uh-huh.
Last summer, I was sitting in, again, I mentioned my buddy Matt Walsh, who I'm doing Paloma Media with, him and a guy named Jake Siegel, great journalist for Tablet Magazine. We're having some drinks, and Jake says to me in this great gravelly voice he has, "Nancy, what the fuck is going on in Portland?" And Matt's like, "Yeah, Nancy, you got to go out there." So Matt used to be editor-in-chief of Reason Magazine. He's still editor-at-large there. Next morning, I text the editor-in-chief, Catherine Mangu-Ward. I was like, "I want to go." She's like, "Go." So I went, and I wound up going 4 times over the course of from July to November, and reporting on what was going on, like being in the streets, being inside the protesters, getting up at 5 a.m. to see who was still around, talking to the cop, or she actually wasn't a cop, but she works with the Portland Police Department. She checks in some of the inmates in the main police station downtown. And on May 27th, when the protesters broke in and set a fire, she's locked down in the basement and what that was like.
Right.
I also talked to some of the Black Bloc kids and how they felt about certain things. And, while they can be total dicks when they're in a mob one-on-one, as is the case.
Tell the people listening what the Black Bloc people are.
So Antifa, which we hear about, Antifa, which is sort of, they call themselves anti-fascist. Well, anyone that's pro-fascist is an idiot. But what they really are is they're anti whatever it is that they don't like. And what they don't like now are the police. They don't like the government. They don't like the mayor. They're certainly, they proclaim, at least when I was in Portland with them, to be very pro Black Lives Matter. And I'm sure that they are, but they've also hijacked that whole experience and cause in order to justify themselves getting out in the streets every night and busting shit up and setting fire to stuff. Weren't you the one that told me the other day that you had gangs that you nicknamed the FSU gang?
Oh yeah, no, in the 3-2, yeah, fuck shit up. They had a gang called Fuck Shit Up, yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of that those gangs are in Portland, and
oh, it's the national chapter. They have to pay their dues to the people in Central Harlem.
They're part of the national chapter, and I was able to, I think, do some reporting that we didn't really see on the protests. What we've seen, and you can tell me if you think this is right. If you go to Fox, you get, savages are coming to your town. And if you go to CNN, you get, what? These are peaceful protesters and they have to have their rights. And, there are little bits of all of that. That's right. What I don't really understand why it is so incredibly difficult for people to wrap in their brains that you have peaceful protesters, and that's awesome. And then you have the non-peaceful protesters, which are a small group, but they can do a lot of damage and demand a lot of attention. For some reason, people that are pro-peaceful protest, and I really don't know why you wouldn't be pro-peaceful protest, they feel like if they admit that other part exists, then it tarnishes the whole experience, which it doesn't. But when you pretend those people that are lighting up the police union hall every night, lighting it on fire, when you pretend that they're not doing any damage, and when you won't arrest them for doing that, you got a problem. Portland has a big problem right now.
But Nancy, one of the things that I find so ridiculous about all this is that I think it's part of government's role is to protect its citizenry. And when they are unwilling or unable to do that, they shouldn't be in their office anymore. Because look, people that just go out and they want to hurt other people that are going about their lives, working, paying taxes, doing what they do. How does the government allow people to just like over the summer when you saw people uh, getting in people's faces that were out to dinner and they would eat their food, or like, how is that okay? How is that peaceful protesting?
It's not okay. It's not okay. But the problem was, I think, I mean, I can't go through the problems of every generation and when these movements, take hold, going back to this, the French Revolution. But I can tell you that in Portland and in Oregon, the seats of power in Salem and in Portland proper, which makes up the majority of the population of Oregon, is extremely liberal. And I don't have a problem with this. I consider myself a liberal in many ways, or center liberal. But they became very, very exercised about Trump, very, very, very angry, and they became part of the CNN watching tribe that everything was Trump's fault. And if everything was Trump's fault, then it couldn't be their fault. So, and when Trump sent it the feds, which, look, let's be frank, he didn't roll it out great. And they also didn't cover themselves in glory. All right. So there were certain legs they could stand on. Well, okay, let's give you that maybe taking people into unmarked vans ain't a great, the optics are not great. Okay.
Right. But something on both sides. I mean, I think Biden was asked about Antifa and he said, oh, that it's an idea. He didn't even admit that they actually exist,
Well, but again, I think that's reactionary. I think because Trump went in and overplayed it, he said, oh, it's this national organization and they're organized, which they're not. Then you've got Biden underplaying it. I'm going to come back to the idea of why you can't look. I have no problem holding in my brain at the same time that if Trump wanted to send in the feds, he could have done a better job of it. And the fact that you had these Antifa, and Black Bloc are basically sort of the violent arm of Antifa, but basically in Portland, they're a bunch of 22-year-old kids that put on black clothes, black bike helmets, they carry umbrellas or collapsible batons or nothing, and they get out and they sloganeer and they get in your face. They know how to fuck shit up because it's just like when you have children, small children, they're great at breaking stuff, but they don't know how to build anything. So these youngsters get out there. I've written this before. It's COVID. Schools are closed. Maybe they lost their jobs. They're not allowed to leave the house. The bars are closed. The music venues are closed. They can't do anything. Oh, but you know what they can do? They can go out every night, be with their crew, fuck shit up, and save the world.
Right.
That's what
but
they do.
When you say that, I find this hard to believe when you say that they're not organized, because in New York City, and I know this has been referenced before, they were delivering pallets of bricks to the protesting sites. And that doesn't happen without organization.
Okay.
When they're coming, hold on, let me finish. When they come to a protesting site in buses, who paid for those buses? How did they know about these buses? You know what I mean? When they all dress in black, who's telling them to all dress in black?
Well, that's been going on for a long time because it disguises you, right? People that are going to behave badly do not want their faces seen.
Right.
You are absolutely right. There is organizations, there's cells, right? And they, you're with your what's it called? Your something group. I'll remember the name of it. So yes, there is. And so you're with your groups, and then there are certain ways where you find out what's going on. What I meant to say is it's not a national organization, right? That's so that everybody's coordinating together. And that's sort of deliberate from what I understand. Like you don't want people knowing what you're doing. What that's also creating.
Well, because they could hit them with RICO.
That's right.
They could. And maybe that's why. That's right. But I was also baffled during these 6 or 7 months of these riots, why the FBI didn't have any major investigations on these groups, and including Black Lives Matter, because they could RICO these people. And I heard nothing about it, which I find curious, because when one side is almost cheering them on and the other side is saying, well, these guys are terrorists. You're right. There's somewhere in between. They have to come together. But I couldn't believe that some people were even denying that what they were doing was criminal.
Well, you had, first of all, at the beginning, at least, you had people sympathetic. I mean, I marched in the streets among these groups, and they were marching through one particular street shouting that the people on this street, these are residential streets, were gentrifiers, and Black people used to live there. And you had people, white couples on the porch, yay, yay, young people spreading your message. Okay, well, I get it. They want to be supportive. You also have people that are afraid to go against, they're like, I don't want to make any noise. I want to just have my life, take my kid to tennis lessons or soccer practice, and I'm not political. Well, that's changed a bit. It started changing when, they're going through the streets at night with lights and shining it in your windows and shouting, get up, get up, get up, motherfucker, get up. And I have to tell you, and I've written this before, in 2019, we had my daughter's dad living with us. I was still living in Portland, and my daughter's dad was living in the house with my husband and me. My daughter came in from New York. Her husband came because her dad was dying of cancer, and he did die of cancer. And we, took care of him at home. He died at home. But I got to tell you, if those people had been marching past my house at midnight, shining a light in his window, it's not going to work. Okay.
Right.
And I think at a certain point, Portland is a pretty liberal and leftist town. I don't think a lot of people have guns in their homes, but at a certain point, and we're already kind of seeing this, someone's going to be like, you know what, fuck this shit. And that's not going to
be right. There's going to be pushback,
and there's going to be pushback, and then the protesters are going to have a better leg to stand on. See, we're getting murdered in the streets. It's like, yeah, but guys, stop annoying people.
Look, this isn't Kent State. It's not Kent State, but they're, the whole thing about even not letting the police is crazy. Like in New York City, I'll give you a perfect example. They had a Black Lives Matter took the Brooklyn Bridge, and they were all marching off the Brooklyn Bridge, and the police used a technique that's called kettling.
Yeah, I know kettling.
And they split them up ingeniously. It's a tactic. Yeah. And they got shit for it. Guess what? We're not going to tell you our tactics before we're going to use them because they work. Same thing. There was another instance in New York City. There was a protest, and the warrant division scooped some guy out of the protest who was wanted. And all the politicians, even the mayor, criticized it. It was a textbook arrest. But it's the kind of crap that when I, as a retired cop, see it, and I'm like, how can they win? They can't even do their job correctly.
Cops are not being allowed to do their jobs.
No.
They've had certain monies taken away. Now, look, we're not going to. First of all, we're not going to get into a discussion about police unions. Number one, because I don't know enough about it. Okay. Number two, there can be improvements in any organization, right?
Absolutely.
So, anyway, I don't know what the answers to these things are.
Well, look, the history of responding to riots and disorder control goes back to Rodney King. That was one of the biggest, caused the biggest riots, one of the biggest riots over that.
At the time.
Yeah.
And was there for the riots.
And because of that, most police departments across the nation trained to how to better respond to a riot. I mean, that idiot, Reginald Denny, he was a famous truck driver.
Yeah.
He got hit in the head with a can. Yeah. He actually almost had brain damage, but he drove into the riot area. Any good policing should preclude letting cars or trucks drive into the riot area.
Why did he do that? By accident?
Or because no one told him that, hey, this riot zone, no one hung up signs saying, yeah, you want a riot, come in here. But that was part of the things that the police had to learn. And we had a chief in NYPD. His name was Louis Animo, who was the chief of the department. And he studied disorder control all over the world and watched how they did it all over the world. And he sort of became the guru on how to respond to riots and disorder. And all of those things that they learned and he brought to the department was forgotten about once the mayor says, I want a soft touch. Now you can't, de Blasio,
Oh my God. I can't stand him. I can't. I don't even understand how someone can be as bad at his job.
But something, the New York City electorate deserve who they vote for. And they voted him in twice. They voted Cuomo in 3 times. He's going on 4 times,
I heard that Andrew Yang is running, he's got COVID.
Does he really?
Yeah, he has COVID.
That's crazy. So tell us about some of the, about even you tried to take pictures at some of these riots.
Yeah. this has been interesting. Actually, of all the stories I wrote for Reason, again, there, you go to reason.com and type in my name. The one that got, I think, the biggest response was in late August, early September, when I wrote about how the story was being disseminated. Because most of the country would see occasional photos of, rioters acting really badly. But mostly what we saw were police acting kind of bad. Like, whether it was like, pummeling people with sticks or, tear gassing them or whatever it is. And
Right.
I was like, well, there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is that the people on the ground, the Black Bloc kids, the people that are causing the mayhem, which is a very, very small minority of the protesters, between maybe 200 and 600 people, they're controlling the narrative. And the way they do that is they get different people that have like press. They put just like Jimmy Olsen in the old Superman, they put like a press thing in their head.
Yeah.
Or they have like the young girls that put medic across their chest, and they all have their little roles. And now you know that they're on your side, meaning they want the demonstrators, rioters, protesters, whatever you want to call them, they want them to look good. So the only pictures they're going to take of them are them setting up the place where they rinse out people's eyes, or here we are giving out ribs. Here we are being besieged by the police. So that's what they photograph. Anything else, they don't photograph. If you photograph it, I was photographing everything. I was photographing these people, those people. They don't want that. So what they do is they stand in front of you. They put their umbrellas in front of they put their hands in front of you. They steal your phone. They stole my phone. They threaten you. I wasn't threatened very often. I got threatened by one wacko that he said he was going to kick my ass. He had a baton. I had a couple other people say, oh, we know who you are. They never want their picture taken. They're like, photography equals death. You're like, could you explain that? Can you explain that to me? No, they can't explain it, Bill. It's just something that they shout. They don't know what they're talking about because they're 20.
Well, you in another interview, you used a really cool term, I thought, and you called it collective effervescence.
Effervescence. Yes, they have this collective effervescence. They're all out there doing these things together, but they don't want you interrupting the narrative. So when you take the pictures, they either A, prevent you from doing it. B, I had this happen multiple times, including by journalists in Portland. They published my picture. Stay away from her. She's a fascist. She's right wing. She's against you. I'm like, I'm not. I am not. And they make sure, they try to make sure that anything anyone else photographs that's not to their narrative doesn't get shown. And then they flood the airwaves with their own stuff. And it's picked up. It's picked up by CNN and MSNBC. I had people pick up my stuff too. BBC, and I did interviews with people. But for the most part, they're successful in controlling the narrative. And the narrative is the cops are bad and we are being besieged. So anyway, that piece seemed to strike a chord with people. They're like, wow, now I know why I'm seeing what I'm seeing.
But doesn't a journalist want to report what's actually happening and not?
Oh, Bill.
No, I know. I'm purposely playing devil's advocate and acting naive. Well, but isn't that supposed to be?
Okay. So I 100% believe in reporting what I see. Now, are people going to have biases? Sure. Are they, some of them unconscious? Yes, of course. But I'm going to show you what I'm seeing. I'm going to put it together in the most honest way that I can, and hopefully leave a little air between the lines, as a editor of mine used to say, so that you can come to some decisions yourself. Mm-hmm. I have no interest in conclusionary journalism, in pre-deciding what the story is, what my publication wants. Now, look, if I work for, I don't know. I've never seen OANN, but I understand they're pretty conservative. Yes. If I wrote for them, or I would be steering my stories that way. I was actually on Fox News for the first time last week. I did a hit for them.
And did they hang upside down in the closet before they interviewed you?
They did. Actually, you know what they did? They pulled a van up right on my corner, this gorgeous news van. I just went down, sat in it, and there was like a picture of a cityscape behind me. And the host was terrific. He was really nice. And he said a few things like, well, he wasn't leading me, but he was like, isn't it like this? And I was like, well, it's kind of like that. Like, I'm going to tell you what I think. I'm not there to parrot what your narrative is. We might even disagree. And how great would that be?
Right.
Because now maybe you can, just like the death penalty, you can give me something that you've experienced and know about, and I give you something. That is not the game for sure that a lot of the journalists in Portland are playing. They were very, very, very pro the protesters' sides, even the violent ones, and literally put my picture online and said she's
Right.
the enemy, which I found to be so juvenile and reprehensible. I was like,
Except that also puts your life in danger. It really
but
does.
they told me that I was putting their, okay, I swear on my daughter's head, I was told that I was putting their lives in danger by photographing what was going on. I was like, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, how are you? It was just ridiculous. But anyway, I do the best.
Nancy, can we just touch upon because I know we don't have that much time left. We've already
Sure.
been here almost an hour and 15 minutes, but I wanted to ask, when you take the teeth out of the law and there's no prosecutions on people doing arsons, basically arson is a very,
It's
very
arson.
serious crime.
It's arson. Yes.
It's very serious. In fact, I think arson first degree is a B felony in New York State, which, qualifies you to 12 and a half to 25 years in prison. In fact, in New York City, they had these two attorneys tossed a Molotov cocktail into a police vehicle.
Oh, I know that story.
And it was empty, thank God. But
yeah.
What were they thinking? Like, what were they thinking?
Okay, they were thinking the ends justify the means, which they never do. That's my next tattoo. The ends never justify the means. Okay, never, never. You tell yourself you're right, and in order to, you just gotta do this one little thing.
Right.
But you would never ever allow that one little thing to be done to you. And when that starts happening, then you have a war, right?
Yeah, I mean, when they started, I know they started going out to Long Island. They actually went to Merrick, Long Island, which is an affluent Jewish community. And there was supposedly there was going to be they were going to torch the stores and stuff. I don't know how they kept it that they didn't, but I had also heard that a whole contingent of retired cops were not going to let that happen.
No, they shouldn't.
And
well, you're asking how they take the teeth out of the law in Portland. You had a new DA that came in August. He wasn't supposed to come until December, but the guy that was leaving basically said to him, you know what? This is going to be your problem, so you do it now. And he came in, he was very liberal, very sympathetic to the protesters in air quotes, and said, you know what? We're not going to have protest related crime that include, property crime, arson, harassment, interfering with an arrest. We're not going to make those crimes so we can focus on more violent crimes.
Wait a minute. So if you're John Q or Nancy Q business owner,
yep.
and they come by and torch your business that you worked your whole life to build, that's okay? I mean,
well, now let me just say what we've seen for the most part has not been that extreme. What they do is they break a window. They set a little fire. It's not like conflagrations. But yes, it's okay, and they're not prosecuted.
But little fires become big fires,
Well, they can. There was a woman, a really good reporter. I interviewed her on I have a Substack. People can go read over at Substack. I interviewed her the other day, Hannah Ray Lambert with Coin TV in Portland. And she did a study, and of 1,000 arrests between May and October, 9% resulted in charges sticking.
Yeah.
So
see, even without not talking about the rioting and all of that, with COVID in New York City, there's no grand juries and there's no trials. So all of these felony cases are basically, what are they at the end of this, when COVID is finally eradicated, if it is in the next year or two, are they going to forgive all of these felony cases?
I wonder, Bill, it'd be interesting for someone to write a piece that sort of tries to understand how COVID contributed to all of the violence in the street we've seen, and also the sort of erasing of police. It's interesting because all of these things happened at the same time. So many crises happened at the same time that we have never had to deal with. That's why sometimes I'm forgiving of certain things. It's like, well, we never dealt with this before. Like the first time you play tennis, you don't know how to play tennis.
Right.
So it would be interesting to see how COVID impacted policing, and policing impacted rioting, and how the whole Megillah kind of has
Well,
worked.
I would like to just know, and I don't think you can answer this, but how did the police become the problem nationally? How did they become the problem when, to me, clearly they're not the problem, but
I
they became the problem for government because politicians are not brave enough to look at themselves. Every violent city in this country has Democrats at the helm.
I think
Chicago, Detroit, now New York. New York was the safest large city in the country. It's no longer.
if you need to be angry, if you're getting your identity from being angry, you need to be angry at someone, right? So who are you going to be angry at? The guy at Baskin Robbins? You're going to be
No,
angry.
I'm angry at Starbucks, Ben and Jerry's, places that have activists as owners. That's where I will not
But
spend my money there.
but do you see what I'm saying? They need a target to be
No,
angry.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so one of the like maybe the most obvious target in every city is someone that claims to have some dominion over your behavior, right?
Right,
It's
right.
going to be when you're a little kid, it's your mother, right? Or your teacher. Well, you get to be a young adult and it's the police. Now, of course, are there bad cops? Of course, there's bad cops. There's bad restaurants. There's bad clothing manufacturers. There's bad everything everywhere.
It's bad firemen. They made that
There's-
big buzzer
oh
go off
my
before.
God, that's right. Oh, I'm
You
not going to
can't
get.
say anything bad about firemen
Can't
because
say it.
they're
I
you
could, but I'm not
can't
going
you
to.
can't do it
But
because they put out fires.
they put out fire. I live next door to a firehouse. Oh, did you see that story? Okay, we're going to digress for a second. Did you see that story that the New York Post has been covering about 2 weeks ago about that gang member that was beaten on the
Yeah, I
street?
saw that. Yeah.
Guess what? I saw that. And
Wow.
I went down because the guy was being beaten and no one was helping him. And I ran downstairs and I opened my front door and this guy is come running toward me. Nope, nothing from the waist down, so covered in blood,
Wow.
like he looked like a can of red paint. And he says to me, "Help me!" And then he spins around this guy in a wheelchair, homeless guy, and runs down the street. And I'm like, "What?" And then I went back, and the cops were there, and I talked to them, and they interviewed me. He comes running back. Anyway, I saw that whole story.
But what that was about something. They seemed to that they had knew
Yeah.
him. They
So
knew
what
him,
they
I
were
think.
saying was everybody in the street was shouting was, "He robbed people on the bus. He robbed people on the bus." But as it turned out, he had arrived on the bus from Atlanta. I don't know. He was from Virginia, someplace, and they were waiting for him. He was a gang member, and you've seen it.
I knew that was about something just watching it because there was too many people went
There were
after that
like
guy.
11 people jumped him. I have never, and you probably have, I have never seen outside of in the movies something as savage as that. It was
That
terrible.
used to be a regular occurrence in Times Square in the 80s. It was we used to call them wolf pack robberies. And they used to,
Oh man. This
20,
guy,
30, 40 kids would attack, a couple of people.
it was terrible. Yeah. Anyway, so
One time when I was working in street crime in 1988, this idiot was looking to buy drugs on the Deuce at like 5 o'clock in the morning. He walks into a crowd and comes out naked. They ripped every single
yeah,
thing, his wallet, his pocket. I was like, look
that'd
at
be
this idiot.
satisfying, right? That'd
And
be
I made a
satisfying.
collar. I grabbed the guy who had a piece of his sweater because I couldn't tell who did what, but this guy had a piece of his sweater and he was it. He got arrested for robbery.
That's great. Well,
Nancy, this was
this is great.
fantastic. I
So
mean,
fun.
we could talk for hours and hours more. Let me just give another shout out to our live chat. 12-step woman, Joey Brooklyn, Vinny Flores, Heidi Lee. You guys are all so thankful that you're listening, watching. Peter Pranzo, and I know it's Richella's birthday tonight. Thanks for listening. Peter Pranzo is a retired lieutenant, and him and his wife are they're like attached at the hip. They don't go anywhere without each other.
Great.
Two great people. And he was on our show recently, just the other night, last night, in fact. Brandon Shelton, Cat in the Hat, Lisa Hogan. And tonight, I believe, or tomorrow night, Nancy Rommelmann is going to be on Duty Ron's show
I am.
at 10 o'clock. And I mean, if you didn't get enough of her tonight, I mean, she obviously got a lot of energy, She could talk. Oh, you know what I wanted to just very quickly ask you
Yeah.
about? How about Barry Weiss? The
Oh,
New
my
York
beloved.
Times.
My literally, I said this to someone the other day. If someone said, "Nancy, you got to walk through fire for Barry Weiss," I'd be like, "I do it. I do it." This woman is so big-hearted and so smart and so
Well, to
fighting.
tell our listeners who she is.
Okay, so Barry Weiss was at the she used to be at the Wall Street Journal. I write for the Wall Street Journal sometimes. She was an editor there, but we didn't meet till she was working at the New York Times at the opinion
Right.
pages. We became friends instantly from the first minute we met. And then she was sort of not liked at the Times because she was considered too conservative, which she's really not. People were mad that she was writing a lot about Jewish subjects. Like, why they would be mad about that, I don't know.
Yeah.
But they basically just didn't like her, and they didn't like her because she was charismatic and smart. And when the CNN cameras came in, they want to talk to her, and she was accomplished and she was loving. And they basically made it very uncomfortable for her. And then,
Well, you know, Nancy, she just wrote an article the other day on
yesterday,
woke culture in the Post.
New
I
York
thought it was
Post,
great. I
double
posted it on my site. I'm
double
probably
page
getting kicked
spread.
off by Mark Zuckerberg. I'll probably be banned, you know.
She's really, I think she's fighting the good fight as she walks the walk. There
But
are
you would think more journalists would be like you and her rather than they
I
toe the
love
line,
journalists. I
you
love
know?
we would think so too, but it's not. I think I have a friend who I'm going to name check here, Heather Hying, and when I had my time in the barrel, my time in the cancel barrel, and she reached out to me and she said something that has proven completely true. I've said it a million times. It is that publicly, a few people will stand up for you. Privately, a few more will, and most people will sit on the fence
Yeah.
and wait to see which way the wind blows. And I think that, unfortunately, journalists are people, and they, whether it's because of that human nature aspect, and or we were talking previously about OANN, but let's say it's Vox or the Daily Beast. You've got what your marching orders are. Maybe they want to keep a job. Maybe they really believe it. Maybe they really believe people like Barry and me are terrible people, and we're standing in the way of whatever progress they want to see. I don't know.
You know, Nancy, there's like a parallel sort of on the police department. If you got in trouble on the police department, it was like you were a pariah. No one would talk to you. People would give you a wide berth. Then when you were cleared, everyone was like, "Oh, I knew you were okay." You know, "Oh,
Yeah.
you're full of shit."
Yeah, there
Where
were
were you when
people
I needed a
you
friend, you know?
when I had my time in the barrel, Barry was the first person to reach out to me, or one of them. And it's what you have to do. You have to do it. And I to me it's the most normal thing in the world. But maybe it's not.
Crazy.
So I want to tell people, if they're on Twitter, they can find me at Nancy Rom. That's with two. That oh yeah, two
There we
Nancy
go.
Rom with two M's. To the bridge. You can go follow Paloma Media on YouTube. And I'd love to be in touch with you guys. Yeah.
Nancy, you were a fantastic guest. I want to thank Duty Ron. And Duty Ron, I just gave you a example of a great guest who you're going to have on tomorrow night. Do I need an agent, to I'm being Nancy's agent.
You're getting the tips. You're getting the 50%.
That's right. Oh, I also want to thank your good friend and my good friend, Yael Bartor, for
Yep.
turning you on to me, if that's the proper word to say,
That's right.
We used to say that when you smoked weed as a kid, right? Turn him on, I turned her on,
Oh, I never did anything.
I didn't either. I had to pass the police drug test. I never did that. Right? But anyway, police off the cuff fans and real crime stories. This is Bill Cannon. I've been with this fantastic writer, Nancy Rommelmann. And you see, there's some hope out there for journalists yet. So everyone, good night. Nancy, thank you so much.